Hi, and welcome to the very first episode of Late Diagnosis Fresh Start, ADHD and everything in between. I'm your host, Tara. Nervous about sharing some of this information, but I'm more so excited to have you here with me. If you're someone who has recently been diagnosed with ADHD, or if you live with or love someone who has ADHD, welcome. I want this to be a safe space for all of us. I'm going to share my journey with you, what it's like to get that diagnosis a little later in life, and how everything starts to make sense once you understand what's going on. Every ADHD story will be different, but I hope you can find some comfort in mine. A little bit about me. I'm a first grade teacher living on Prince Edward Island in Canada. I'm an author, a creator, a mom to several animals, no humans, and I chase dopamine through various side hustles, which is how this podcast was born. I got diagnosed with ADHD earlier this year at 52. This was a mind-blowing moment, full of emotions, but it also helped me realize that for the first time in my life, I felt like I fit in somewhere. And that feeling of being seen, well, it continues to be life-changing. Like everyone, I'm also trying to find a work-life balance while juggling all the things that surprise us along the way. Being 52, I'm also dealing with perimenopause and aging parents, one of whom has dementia. There's a lot on our plates. Every one of us is carrying a heavy load. We've all had to navigate through a pandemic and a gazillion ongoing world issues. So many of us are burnt out or are hanging on by that last little thread. So here I am, trying to make life a bit easier and hoping it will help others too. Throughout this podcast, I'm going to talk about what it's like to live with ADHD as an adult and what it was like to grow up with an undiagnosed neurodiversity. I'll share the highs, the lows, and the adventures. In future episodes, we'll dive into topics like the struggles with negative self-talk, why ADHD makes it hard to stick to routines and careers. I'll talk about ADHD paralysis and burnout and how it affects our relationships. I'm hoping that by sharing my experiences, I'll help others learn along with me, while developing even more empathy and compassion for those adults and children living with neurospicy brains. Don't feel alone in this, because you aren't. We're all navigating it together. So grab a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, get comfortable, and let's dive in. How does one define ADHD? It's quite tricky. The acronym stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. Quite the handle. According to the Center for ADHD Awareness in Toronto, ADHD is classified as a chronic neurodevelopmental disorder, meaning it affects or impairs the nervous system. And they state that worldwide, it's in at least 4% of adults and 5% of children. It affects focus and attention, and it varies day to day, minute to minute, person to person. ADHD is hereditary and can affect anyone, regardless of their gender, ethnicity, or socioeconomic background. Even though you're hearing a lot about it these days, it's actually underdiagnosed, misdiagnosed, and underrecognized. In a future episode, I'll get into more detail, but it's important to know that those with ADHD are at a greater risk of learning difficulties, other mental health disorders, low self-esteem, weight issues, substance abuse, just to name a few. These contributing factors can put ADHD at risk of an earlier death than neurotypicals. This fact breaks my heart and is adding to the drive I feel to try to understand it better and help make it more manageable for all of us. It's a lot to take in and often overwhelming. I've cried a fair bit in the last few months as I process more information. Tears of realization and revelation, tears of grief for what could have been, and tears of joy as I finally feel validated. There are 3 types of ADHD: hyperactive, inattentive, and the most common combined. Those with hyperactive will struggle with trying to stay still and be more impulsive. Someone who struggles with inattention could be diagnosed with inattentive ADHD. This is what I initially thought I had. However, I'm learning I probably have combined ADHD. The inattentive type tends to show itself as hyperactivity in the brain, and that person can look like they are daydreaming or not paying attention to what they should be. So they appear inattentive more than most neurotypicals. Chances are they have 4 or 5 other thoughts going on and may even be sitting there anxious or worried about something. that may never even happen. Those with combined ADHD will struggle with a mixture of those other two. It's especially important to know that everyone with ADHD deals with difficulties that neurotypicals don't. People with ADHD don't know life any other way, so they don't even realize they have any impairments, despite how hard some things are. This is their normal. They are often called unmotivated or lazy. They feel that way too. Their internal dialogue can be really negative through no fault of their own. They can go through life thinking they aren't as smart as others because of their struggles, but this isn't true. ADHDers are often the entrepreneurs and the outside-the-box thinkers. We need the ADHDers. Another trait they are known for is feeling on deeper levels and being more sensitive. Much of that has to do with rejection sensitivity dysphoria, or RSD, which a lot of ADHDers have. It means that rejection, which is always unpleasant for anyone, is even more overwhelming and has deeper levels of emotional pain if you have ADHD. As someone who does have RSD, I can tell you that it is crippling at times. It's held me back a lot and has been the reason for hours of time, isolated and self-loathing, blaming myself for things I didn't even do. I will likely spend an episode or two just on this topic, as it's a big one. Because ADHD is different in everyone, the symptoms aren't always easy to spot. And these symptoms are characteristics common in everyone. But in someone with ADHD, these symptoms occur more often and can even at times be constant. People with ADHD will have more difficulty regulating their focus and attention than someone with a neurotypical brain. If something's boring to an ADHDer, their brain can tune out, whether they want it to or not. I have counted ceiling tiles in many a meeting. And if something is interesting, will have a really hard time breaking focus and might even get angry or annoyed if someone interrupts that focus. When I'm into one of my crafty side hustles or a giant Lego kit, don't come near me unless it's an absolute emergency. I will not be happy. I'll get more into the hyperfocus topic in a future episode. So, everyone with ADHD will have struggles with attention. This we know. Some will have trouble with hyperactivity and impulsivity, but not everyone. Some will have problems with executive functioning. This means they might struggle with organization, remembering things, time management, social skills, regulating behaviors, working memory. The list goes on and on. It's exhausting. And with each one, there are loads of ways it can show up. More on that in future episodes. Those with ADHD learn differently, and they need different supports. They can't control their symptoms, and some environments will make life harder than others, depending on the day. When it comes to paying attention, as I said earlier, the ADHDer might daydream or tune out. They might find it hard to stay focused, even when doing something they love. Good luck getting an ADHDer to stay focused if they are bored. Back to counting those ceiling tiles. The hyperactivity might show up as fidgeting or stimming, talking too fast or too much, oversharing, deep diving into fun activities, trying to do too much at once, leaving things until the last minute, hopping from activity to activity, feeling restless or unsettled, both physically and emotionally. They may seem chaotic and disorganized, and they could be procrastinators. That's one of my big ones. They might have feelings of underachievement, even when they are doing amazing things. There's so much to ADHD, and that's why I feel so drawn to making this podcast. I've been learning loads since my diagnosis. There's so much I wish I'd known before, and that I now want to share. I think my life could have been different, but I'm honestly not one to look back. I can't remember a lot of it anyway. My brain has always been too busy to retain things. We are very much living in the moment. I'm happy this diagnosis led me here. I feel compelled to share as I learn and grow, and I really hope that I can help someone else feel less alone in their own journey with ADHD. Whether it's yours, your partner's, your child's, or someone you work with or care about. If you remember one thing from this first episode, it's to know that the symptoms of ADHD can vary a lot, and they are qualities found in all humans. Not only does this add to the difficulty of getting a diagnosis or a misdiagnosis, but it can also be used to make someone with ADHD feel like their struggles aren't valid. ADHD is not a trend, even if you're hearing about it more and more. and everyone is not a little bit ADHD. In recent years, we've started hearing about it more frequently, and the social media accounts, they are aplenty. This is largely due to science catching up, as well as more people seeking answers to their struggles. In the 70s and 80s, ADHD was only studied in young boys, and we didn't know it carried into adulthood. Now, we are seeing more information come to light that includes all of us, regardless of our age or our gender. And so many who struggled their entire lives are now getting diagnosed as life has gotten too hard to manage. Somehow, they've done it though, while raising families and trying to balance relationships and jobs, friendships, aging parents, and so much more. They have been and are struggling to cope, and they are seeking answers. However you identify, or whatever your age, you deserve a proper diagnosis and the opportunity to explore medical and non-medical treatments and accommodations that will help you live up to your potential and find the happiness you deserve. You are not broken. Say that again and make it your mantra. That is what I am doing all the time. You are not broken. It's a hard shift. All this information might seem a little all over the place, but that's kind of what ADHD is. And if you want to learn more, I encourage you to seek out more information and tune into future episodes. I'll share more of my own life experiences as they connect to various symptoms of ADHD and life in general. So with that, I want to tell you how I ended up here in this moment. As I said in the beginning, I'm a school teacher. Last spring, 7-8 months ago, while chatting with a friend and colleague, they mentioned that I reminded them a bit of someone they knew who was recently diagnosed with ADHD as an adult. That's funny, I thought. I don't have ADHD in the sense that I always understood it. Over the next few weeks, we chatted about this a few times, and eventually this led me to doing an ADHD assessment. Why not? Like so many, I was unfamiliar with all the ways ADHD can show up in our lives. I didn't know any more than I needed to. As a school teacher, first grade, anytime it came up throughout my career, it was trying to help a child with what we believed was hyperactive ADHD. I really didn't think much would come of my own assessment, but I was still curious. On reflection, I was thinking I was just burned out from the pandemic and from my career. I got so down during home learning because I wasn't getting enough human contact, as much as I love my dogs. The assessment I did was the general one they currently use in Canada in the medical system. There are other assessments out there, so if you do one, be sure you know what it is, where it came from, that it's legitimate, and what it's measuring. I was absolutely floored and flabbergasted. I scored 100%. What the heck? I got a perfect score for having ADHD. So many emotions took over, and I honestly have no idea how I was even feeling. I didn't believe it at first because it didn't make sense to me. I did then make an appointment with my doctor, and while waiting for that, I started Googling, reading online, and having a lot of aha moments. The day came for my appointment, which went really well. My doctor was super supportive. One moment I do remember really well was asking if maybe the anxiety disorder that I was diagnosed with in my 20s and have been medicated for ever since was actually a symptom of the ADHD. We had a moment of wow. I was then asked, do you want to try medication? Yes, please. Let's see what happens. I've been on anxiety meds for many years. I've been in the emergency room in the past for panic attacks, and that's been so debilitating and exhausting. Anyone who's had a panic attack knows there's a lot of recovery time needed after. I've had bouts of anxiety that have kept me in bed for days, health anxiety being the biggest. I've hidden much of this from most people. After this appointment, I started to reflect on what I could remember from my childhood that might connect to ADHD. This kind of sounds sad, but I don't have a lot of happy memories. But that's not because I didn't have a good childhood. My brain just decided to hang on to the negative memories. That's part of having the rejection sensitivity dysphoria that can come with ADHD. That's part of being extra sensitive. I can remember as a child being told, don't be so sensitive. Suck it up. Just push through. They can do it, so can you. That makes me so emotional, just remembering that, because I now know that was out of my control. And when we say things like this to kids and adults with ADHD, we are giving them more reason to self-loathe and to negative self-talk. I am an expert in that. I want to go back in time and say to that little girl, Tara, hey, I've got you now. You're okay. Getting an ADHD diagnosis validated my feelings. Having a label is actually a really good thing for me. It gives me a better understanding of some things, why I maybe felt so introverted at a certain event or around certain people, and why I feel the opposite, super extroverted at events that feed my soul and when I'm surrounded by people and energy that makes me feel safe. It allows me to tell others, this is why I'm like this. I have ADHD. There's so much I want to share with you about my own journey. But those of us with ADHD may tune out if I talk too long, and they may have left already. So I'll let you know that I plan to share more in future episodes. I'll talk more about the deep feelings we have, how we can sometimes have a sixth sense about people who maybe don't have our best interests in mind. I'll talk about how the ADHD brain doesn't shut off. We have a gazillion tabs open at once. I'll get into the food sensitivities that I have always had and the other sensory issues I've dealt with and still do. I'll get into how we can better manage our homes, including our finances and cleaning the house. We are prone to being a bit out of sight, out of mind, which can be both good and bad. We have a very strong sense of justice. Our empathy is off the charts, and we do tend to hold grudges because we sometimes only remember that time you did something not so nice. We really struggle with self-worth. And lastly, I'll explore more about the negative self-talk, which impacts everything. Guess what happened? Guess what happened when I took medication for the first time? I fell asleep for what it felt like the first time in my life. At 52 years of age. Now, I know that sounds insane. I think I've been passing out from exhaustion my whole life, and I never even knew what it meant to fall asleep. It was an unbelievable feeling. As I get to the end of this first episode, I want to thank you for listening. I hope I gave you something to think about and that I didn't overwhelm you too much. An ADHD brain is overwhelmed much of the time. This podcast, I'm hoping, will help you feel less alone and more likely to seek help. ADHD does not define who you are, but it can help motivate you to try things in a different way, a way that works for your neurospicy brain. I really want to find out more about mine, and in doing so, maybe we can help each other love ourselves a little bit more. I need to give a special shout out to those with ADHD who paid attention the whole time. That is not easy. If you're like me, you need to replay or reread everything before it will sink in. Before I sign off, if you found this entertaining or helpful today, please follow along where you get your podcasts or on YouTube and stay tuned for future episodes. Thank you for listening to Late Diagnosis, Fresh Start, ADHD, and everything in between. I'm Tara. I have ADHD, and I have loved chatting with you. See you again soon.